stumbles.
He is hit. He stumbles. He's down.
WENJ HD Millville, Atlantic City. This is Game Night with Josh Hennig on 97.3 ESPN and the free mobile app. Now, live from the Matt Black Kia Studios.
What a move!
Here's Josh Hennig.
First day of February, and the news cycle in sports is off the hook. Josh Hennig hanging out with you here in the Matt Black Kia Studios on 97.3 ESPN. Yes, the Flyers played tonight, the final game before the All-Star break. We'll get into a little bit of the Flyers with Kevin Durso coming up at 6:20. But we got Sixers win last night without Joel Embiid. The Brian Flores class action lawsuit exploding all over the NFL. On top of all of that, you also have Tom Brady retiring. So we got a lot to get to, just a little bit of time here. It's one of those days you wish you had more time, but you got me for 1 hour. I'm going to give you my best for that 1 hour. As always, you can join the conversation. You can DM the show. Direct messages come through the 97.3 ESPN mobile app. Thanks to First Bank of Sea Isle City. You also can text in at 609-403-0973. If you have the 97.3 ESPN mobile app, you already would have gotten the latest from me about Joel Embiid and the MVP race in the NBA. But before we get to any Sixers and Flyers, the two big NFL stories today, it's leading off of SportsCenter. It's all over the internet. And I just want to kind of break down for you guys out there some of the details that have come out about this. So here's the background for those of you out there who are kind of trying to, parse through the information and weed through the minutia. Brian Flores, the former head coach of the Miami Dolphins, the man who I had told you weeks ago should have never been fired by Stephen Ross, the owner of the Dolphins. And I told you guys weeks ago, there was something that didn't feel right. There was something fishy about this hiring cycle. And I had told you guys weeks ago, if Stephen Ross came calling, I wouldn't want to work for that guy because he fired a coach who the players loved in favor of keeping a GM who had made some questionable decisions. Brian Flores' lawsuit takes everything that I said and it basically amplifies it to 1,000,000%. The details of this lawsuit are frankly scathing and a major black eye on the NFL. Here's the breakdown. Number one, Brian Flores is basically accusing the New York Giants and the NFL as a whole of discrimination and basically functioning off of a racial bias is the best way to explain it for those of us. Now, I didn't read the entire lawsuit. I've read parts of it. I haven't combed through the whole thing yet. But from what I have read so far is Brian Flores is basically saying that the NFL is not acting fairly under the equal opportunity employment clauses as well as under their own NFL rule known as the Rooney Rule, which requires teams to interview minority coaches for the opportunity for jobs that they might not have been considered for before. Now, whatever your opinion is about hiring practices, we all know the truth. The truth is we live in a world where a lot of people get jobs not because they're the most qualified, not because they're the best person for the job, but because they know the right people. There's a nepotism that is rampant in society. To me, the problem with this is that Brian Flores, because of who he is going to be treated a certain way. He's going to be portrayed a certain way. But the reality is, whether you want to admit it or not, and I know there are some people out there who listen to hear my voice right now on 97.3 ESPN FM or online, 97.3ESPN.com, the 97.3 ESPN mobile app, powered by First Bank of Seattle City. You may not want to hear this, but the reality is that there are people getting jobs every day in every field of life based on things that are frivolous. They may not be the best person for the job. They're just the person that job wants. Brian Flores, days before he interviewed for the New York Giants job, through text messages with current Patriots head coach and his former boss, Bill Belichick, accidentally spilled the beans that the Giants had decided they were hiring Brian Daboll, their current head coach and former OC or offensive coordinator for the Bills. Brian Flores found out days before he was interviewing that the job had already been decided for Daboll before he ever interviewed. Apparently, Flores, this is not the first poor experience he has had with NFL teams. He documents in the lawsuit that years earlier that the Broncos didn't take his interview seriously before hiring Nick Fangio. The owner of the Dolphins, according to this lawsuit, tried to bribe Brian Flores, offering him $100,000 per loss if he would make his team lose to help their draft stock. And in recent years, the owner of the Dolphins had been unhappy that Flores was winning this past year and in previous years because it was hurting their draft position and opportunities to draft certain players. Stephen Ross, the owner of the Dolphins, also wanted Flores to participate in tampering with potential free agents and trying to coerce them to come to the Dolphins before they were allowed to have conversations with players in free agency. Again, this is all in the Brian Flores lawsuit. And Flores admits in his own statement that he understands that he may be jeopardizing his coaching future. Frankly, I think the NFL needs to do two things in reaction to both of these separate accusations, because there's two separate accusations. One accusation is that the owner of the Dolphins was trying to fix the results of games in order to manipulate his opportunity to get a better draft pick. That in and of itself is scary. It's dangerous. And to me, I think the NFL, if they find that any shred of that is true about Stephen Ross in terms of these Flores accusations, he needs to be unequivocally removed as owner of the Dolphins. We live in a world where Jerry Richardson was basically forced out of his job as the owner of the Panthers by the other owners over basically his own actions of prejudice, racism, misogyny, and just being a scumbag. Donald Sterling lost his ownership of the Clippers for being a dirty old man, a racist, and a scumbag and a loser. If you are allowed to remove those men for things that didn't directly have anything to do with on the field, anything, how can you not remove Stephen Ross for literally trying to fix the outcome of games on the field by promising somebody $100,000 for each loss? This is no different to me than Tim Donaghy being accused of fixing basketball games for gambling purposes, or the point shaving scandals that have happened in college basketball for sports betting and manipulation of money purposes. What's the difference? To me, there is none. That's the first thing. The NFL needs to get on this Stephen Ross thing with the veracity and the intensity of a district attorney running for public re-election. They need to act like their life depends on this, because you cannot, in today's world, have any impropriety with your sport, a sport that 100 million people watching on Championship Sunday. And you have an owner trying to basically manipulate the outcome of games on the field, manipulate your draft process, and basically force his coach to lose games and to do things that is basically spitting in the face of everything the league stands for. That's the first thing that has to happen. Number two, whatever your position is on any of this stuff, when it comes to people, as some people call it, using the race card, people stirring the pot, whatever verbiage you want to call it, okay? Let me give you some truth. And I said this years ago when the whole Kaepernick stuff came up. And nobody wanted to talk about what I wanted to talk about when it came up. And I think part of it was because we live in a society where people don't like the truth. We don't have a racism problem in this country. We have a prejudice problem. People hate anyone who doesn't fit within the box and the parameters that they like. Hiring practices in this league, the NFL, have always been, frankly, a bit sketchy. They have always been, for lack of a better term, curious. Okay? And, you know, the Giants, their statement is, this isn't true. We didn't decide before we interviewed Flores. They have to say that. All right? The Broncos statement came out that the allegations from Flores directed to the Broncos are blatantly false. Okay? And they basically do a breakdown. I'm not going to read it all, but basically they break down that the timing of the interview that Flores claims they were late for, okay, which apparently lasted 3.5 hours according to their information. Then they will vigorously defend against the accusations that it was a fraudulent interview. The Broncos have to say that. The Giants have to say that. But the NFL is a different story. The NFL has allowed prejudice, nepotism to go on for years. This is not just a football problem. This is a world problem. We live in a world where this stuff happens all the time. Flores is not wrong in feeling like he has been basically the tool in somebody else's scheme to do whatever they want. Frankly, the Giants and the Broncos and other organizations have all functioned on a level of mocking the system of equal opportunity employment. That's a national rule in this country, that you have to be honest in all of your hiring practices. You cannot bring someone in for an interview, tell them they have an opportunity for a job, but then never have the intention of hiring them. That's against the law. It's not. This is an NFL problem. You cannot have this black eye on your sport. The easiest way to solve this is the NFL needs to either tell these teams, we are going to be involved in the hiring process at every level, or the teams have to document their entire process. By the way, there's a lot of businesses that have to document who they hire, why they hire them, and give that information. Because at the end of the day, Ryan Poles, this is not part of the Brian Flores lawsuit. But I told you guys when Ryan Poles got the job, and 48 hours later, Matt Eberflus is the head coach. with no connections to polls, no previous relationships. You're telling me you could do a good job of interviews in 48 hours and then you conveniently hire a guy. It sounds like to me that Poles got the job in Chicago because, he was told you're going to hire Matt Eberflus. You don't think the Giants hired Joe Schoen with the intention of always hiring one of the Bill coordinators, specifically potentially Brian Daboll. You don't think that it's a coincidence that Josh McDaniels got the Raiders job as a package deal with one of the executives from the Patriots organization. These are not coincidences. The NFL needs to act swiftly because you cannot go forward with this kind of black eye on your league on two completely separate fronts. The imbecile Stephen Ross needs to be kicked out of the league, and the league needs to either hold the hand of these organizations as they go through hiring practices to make sure they stop basically breaking laws, or they need to go out there and change the rules when it comes to the hiring process. Because whether Brian Flores wins his lawsuit or not, and I got a feeling he's going to win part of that suit because some of the details in there just can't be refuted. Those Bill Belichick texts are incredibly damning. You cannot proceed as business as usual if you're the NFL. All right, we will get to the Flyers and Sixers stuff coming up here on Game Night. You could join the conversation. I will get to your message a little bit later in the hour. You can DM the show through the 97.3 ESPN mobile app. Thanks to First Bank of Seattle City. Text board is open at 609-403-0973. Flyers Insider Kevin Durso joins me next right here on 97.3 ESPN FM and the 97.3 ESPN mobile app. It's free thanks to First Bank of Seattle City.
It's Sixers basketball tomorrow on 97.3 ESPN with the voice of the 76ers, Tom McGinnis, calling all the exciting play-by-play action.
Difficult shot. It's up and good again. He's made 3 big shots down the stretch, and Embiid pours in the long two.
The Sixers host the Wizards. Coverage begins at 7 p.m. Philadelphia 76ers basketball on your radio home of the Sixers in South Jersey. 97.3 ESPN.
Matt Black Kia has a solution to your New Year's resolution. Don't drive around in a car you hate. Trade it in for something great. So bring us any trade, no matter the make, no matter the mileage, no matter the condition, and put 0 down. Pay 0 interest for 60 months or make no payments for 90 days. If you're currently stuck in a loan or lease, Matt Black Kia can get you released. Choose from the largest selection of certified pre-owned Kias. So why make a resolution you can't keep? Trade in your old Heat and drive away in a new Kia with 0 down and 0 interest for 60 months on every 2022 Kia Stinger, or make no payments until next year.
It's gotta be a Matt Black Kia.
Offers with approved Tier 1 or 2 credit through Kia Motors Finance. Not all will qualify. 0% based on 1667 per 1,000 borrowed. Negative equity financed into the loan. Excludes taxes, title, license. Offers don't combine. Call 877-289-6670 or go to mattblackkianj.com for complete details. Expires 2/6/2022. Matt Black Kia, 6211 Black Horse Pike, Egg Harbor Township, and now on Route 37 in Toms River.
Paid for by Christian Care Ministry.
Here's some great news. If you missed the deadline to sign up for health insurance, or if, like a lot of people, you just have a plan you're not happy with, you still have a choice. It's called MediShare. It's a Christian healthcare sharing program. There are more than 400,000 members now, and they love it. In fact, MediShare has double the customer satisfaction rate compared to that of health insurance. And MediShare really is the gold standard when it comes to healthcare sharing. It's been around more than 25 years. Members have shared more than $4 billion of each other's medical bills. Plus, MediShare is for you. It has saved its members billions by advocating on their behalf. Best of all, the typical savings for a family is around $6,000 a year. So if you think you're stuck with a high-cost health plan that doesn't have much to offer, think again. MediShare has a 98% customer satisfaction rating, and you are invited to be part of it. Call now. 855-51-BIBLE. That's 855-51-BIBLE. 855-51-BIBLE.
Why does Walgreens offer copays as low as $0 and 90-day refills? Because we care about Medicare, so you don't have to. I mean, do you really care to hear me go on about same-day prescription delivery making your life easier? Or how there's a pharmacy expert available 24/7 and one-click refills? Well, I just did anyways. Fill your Medicare prescriptions with Walgreens and save.
$0 copays apply to Tier 1 generic drugs and select plans with Walgreens as a preferred pharmacy. Restrictions apply. See walgreens.com/Medicare for complete details.
You're listening to Game Night with Josh Hennig on 97.3 ESPN and the free mobile app.
Flyers' final game before the All-Star break is tonight. Of course, you can hear all the action, as always, here on 97.3 ESPN FM and all Flyers games streaming online via the 97.3 ESPN mobile app at 97.3ESPN.com. Kevin Durso is live at the Wells Fargo Center. Join us right now on the phone line to talk more about the Flyers and the NHL coming up on the All-Star break. Kevin is live at the center tonight for the Flyers versus the Winnipeg Jets. Kevin, how you doing today?
I'm doing well, Josh. How are you?
I'm doing pretty good. And before we get to any specific Flyers stuff, I want to kind of loop you in to some of the news of the day about, basically this issue of hiring practices. This guy, Brian Flores, is accusing the NFL of basically violating every common sense rule when it comes to hiring practices. And I'm kind of curious how this could be a domino effect to other sports, because a sport like hockey, well, frankly, they hire and fire guys at the whim in many ways. And, you look around sports, there's always been a bit of nepotism. There's always been a bit of lack of transparency when it comes to sports hiring practices. Is there a sense maybe that, the NHL, which is famous or infamous, depending on who you ask, for hiring and firing people, maybe keeping a close eye on what happens with the NFL, and this coach basically saying, you guys decided to hire people before ever interviewing me?
Yeah, I mean, I've seen a little bit of the story that's going around, and, certainly there's a lot of areas that you can look at with the NHL in regards to how this could have a domino effect. I mean, for one, I don't want to sit there and say that there's anything that's necessarily to this extent in the hiring process, but yes, there are guys who it's constantly a carousel of coaches and things of that nature and general managers, and everybody seems to end up in a new place. So, I think the angle that I would take on something like this is that we don't see too many outside of the box hirings in the NHL, and it's usually the same recycled process. So I wonder if that's something that would change down the line, and knowing that there are options out there in all avenues and all different places to get what would qualify as good hockey people. And it's a term that kind of needs to die off a little bit, because there's new ways of seeing it. I mean, I'll give you an example of one kind of not outside of the box hiring, but something a little different. In Seattle, Cami Granado was a scout for Seattle, and that, to have a female in a front office position and start to take steps towards that being a big thing down the road. I mean, I wouldn't be shocked at all if we start to see the possibility of female general managers and certainly other more diverse hirings down the line at the start in this area. But certainly every sport has a lot of room to grow in that department. And I think now you're seeing this really come to light with what's going on in the NFL.
Yeah. And to me, Kevin, and to me, the bigger problem isn't just diversity. It's the fact that we literally have laws in this country, EOE laws, equal opportunity employment. There are so many people, and we all know of those people, Kevin, whether it's in sports or other areas of life, they have gotten jobs not because they're the most qualified, not because they're the best candidate, but because they know somebody, they're friendly, their cousins, dads, brothers, friends, sisters, husband gets a job. This stuff happens all the time. And there's a part of me that hopes that people start opening their eyes to the fact that not everybody gets the job because they're the right person for the job.
Yeah, definitely. And, we see this a lot in certain areas. That sometimes, I think a term is kind of used when we describe things like that is we would call it a popular hire, not necessarily in the sense that everybody feels like somebody's the best person for the job, but it's the popular name that's out there. How many times do we see people who get hired because they're the name that's out there, as opposed to it's almost like taking the easy way out to an extent. So I'd be curious to see if that does change things, because I think we do need to start looking at who the best candidates are for certain positions, especially these positions where teams are being operated and, whether it's coaching side, management side, you name it. I mean, you want to have the best people in there for the job, and we need to be a little bit more open-minded to stuff like that for sure.
And part of being open-minded, Kevin, the NHL has the opposite problem of the NFL. The NFL seems to want to always find the new face, the new guy. Hockey, it feels like the same dudes are always getting jobs almost all the time. How can hockey do a better job at not, for example, and I'm not trying to be mean, but Alain Vigneault getting 3-4 jobs, or Ken Hitchcock getting 7-8 different head coach jobs? How can hockey do a better job themselves? Mike Yo's even been a former head coach. He's the interim coach right now. How can hockey do a better job at giving guys in their sport better opportunities?
Yeah, that's a tough question to answer because of the fact that there are some opportunities where it's guys getting their first job, and we're seeing how the effects are on certain teams. Again, I think it comes back to what I was saying about it being a popular decision. Even back when in December when Alain Vigneault was fired, and there was a possibility, you're kind of wondering, is somebody just going to get hired right away, or will they go the interim route? What were the names that were coming up? We were talking about Claude Julien, John Tortorella, Mike Babcock, and these are all the guys who have been around the block before, had multiple stops, kind of have what would be described as an old school way of doing things. And that's part of the problem. It's the old school way of doing things, and the game has evolved so much. I can't tell you how many times I've seen that clip float around of, Trevor Zegras is having an outstanding year with Anaheim. He's doing some pretty creative things out there. And John Tortorella's on ESPN telling people this isn't good for the game. I disagree. It's really good for the game because it's a new way of doing things. It's a new way of having success. It shows an evolution of the way the game is played. And that's how sports are successful. You want to see new things. You don't want to just see the same things done over and over again by a new group of people. You kind of want to see some new things. There are going to be old school ways that work no matter how long the game is played. But certainly you need to start to see some new creativity. And I think that goes with maybe hiring some people who you wouldn't give a shot previously. In the Flyers case, the name I mentioned previously in some conversations about their future and possibilities in management is Danny Briere. Well, Danny Briere's never had a job at the NHL level yet. Certainly he's the type of guy who you could think about seeing if there's a way that his style helps things move forward and help with that evolution. So those are the types of hires that you have to make. And then to an extent, is it part of the old guys club a little bit? Yeah, it is. He's a former player and he did play for the franchise and all that type of stuff. And I get that. But if it's a guy who's never had a job before and kind of understands today's player and the way that today's athlete, kind of ticks, this happens at all sports, really. You kind of have to understand how the athlete of today, how they're thinking. There's a lot of athletes out there that don't just want to be instructed on what they should do, but they want the why. Why should I do it this way? People like Danny Briere and younger guys who have played not too long ago that understand how the game's changed so recently can help in that path. So I think that that's something to consider as well when you're making hiring.
Kevin Durso, Flyers Insider for 97.3 ESPN.com, joining us here on Game Night. Flyers taking on the Jets top of the hour right here on 97.3 ESPN. Of course, you can follow Kevin on Twitter for all your Flyers and NHL coverage at Kevin_Durso. Kevin, on the ice, Flyers broke their losing streak on Saturday afternoon. What does that mean for this team, though? I mean, obviously, they're not going to make the playoffs this year. They're basically just trying to get through the season. They're 14-22 at this point, 36 points. But what does breaking the losing streak mean?
Well, in the immediate, it means that there's going to be a little bit of confidence that's in their game. And, one of the challenges with a game like this one for both sides, for both the Flyers and the Winnipeg Jets, is you don't have a game for a little while after this. So kind of the challenge is don't overlook the fact that there is still a game to be played. And it's easier said than done, obviously, because teams start to look ahead to the fact that you're going to have some time off. You're going to get a break. The only player who's going to the All-Star game for the Flyers is Claude Giroux. And that means that the rest of the guys either get, A, more practice time, or B, some time to rest. And either way, you start to look forward to those things when you only have one game left on your schedule. So that's kind of the challenge on the ice. But I think that just getting a win is an important thing just because of the fact that, the longer it goes on, the more you start to think that it's just going to be a regular occurrence. It's going to happen all the time. It feels never ending. The guy who I think I looked at most from Saturday's game who finally got a win was Carter Hart. He was pretty much close to single-handedly ending the losing streak multiple times with just the way he's played and how he kept the team in games. And he didn't have a win to show for it all that time, despite how well he's been playing overall. And he finally gets one. So I'm sure his confidence level is up higher than it was, even though he was playing really well. And for a lot of guys, it can give you a little bit of a boost and it can give you a little bit of extra energy. And we'll see if that translates. I mean, there's always the opportunity to start a little bit of a winning streak when you have the first one. And obviously there's always the possibility that this is the first game of something that could be another streak heading in that direction. You know, there's both options are on the table. This could be the first game of another lengthy losing streak against some really good teams because the Flyers just don't have the talent to match, or they could come out with the high energy and how they've come really close to winning in previous games up until they finally got one on Saturday and maybe start a little bit of a winning streak. I don't know how much that's going to help the plan for the rest of the season per se, but certainly that's something that could happen as a result of just finally getting one.
You read my mind, I feel like, because I wanted to ask you about Carter Hart. I feel like this season has kind of overshadowed him in many ways. He almost has more wins already than he did last year. His goals against average is almost an entire goal less than it was last year. I mentioned the Flyers have, 14 wins? He has 8 of those 14 wins. Like, I don't think that we have talked enough about that. Carter Hart, after a very disappointing and down year last year, he himself, separate from the team, has genuinely bounced back.
Yeah, and that's the bright spot of the season, and it's the thing you're going to continue to look for all the way down the stretch, because the fact that if you're going to talk about the future of the franchise, you're going to talk about all the things that could happen in an off season and things like that. You know, I know that there was a little bit made about the press conference last week and how Carter Hart's name didn't come up at all. I don't think that was anything done purposely. I think that was it just happened to be that way. He's part of this team's future. He's pretty much everything to the team's future. You got to have a goaltender, and he's playing well enough to instill the confidence moving forward that he can be the guy going forward, clearly. And, you know, that's all you can ask for from him right now. Wins and losses is not going to matter at the end of the year in terms of his own individual record, because there's a lot of that he can't control. But if his goals against is still in a good territory, his save percentage is in a good area, then you know it's not all on him. You know he's giving you what you expect. You know he's giving you the performances that can lead to wins in the future with a better team around him. So you start to build around him. And that's the key to moving forward, is seeing that he finishes this year as strongly as he started it, and then finding a way to build around him to have some success, you know, especially since he's still young enough to go through such a process. You know, whether this is I know they said they don't want it to be a 3 to 5 year rebuild, but whether it is or whether it's a couple of years or whatever the case may be, you do have time with him. He's young enough that you have time to build around him and still utilize his prime. And, you know, it's probably it's in the franchise's best interest. Don't screw it up. You got a goaltender. Don't screw that part of it up, and utilize everything else that you can to build around him so that you have a team that can compete at some point while he's still in the prime of his career as your number one goaltender.
Yeah, and for those who don't know out there who are listening, you know, Carter Hart is 23 years old. Doesn't turn 24 until before next season. So it's not like he's like 28, 29 years old and you're running out of real estate. Listen, if you need a year to kind of figure things out, hit that reset button, you can get away with it right now, but you better have it figured out long term, right? Because let's be realistic. The one thing this team has needed for years was a goaltender. Now you finally have the goaltender, and the rest of the roster is a mess.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, the important thing to me is that, you know, when last offseason rolled around, he was the type of guy that we were asking questions about when he signed the contract. What performance were you going to get out of him? Is he good enough to be the number one guy? Because last season obviously wasn't very good. And he has bounced back, and he's answered the question very affirmatively, and that's what you need. You needed him to do that and give you some confidence in his abilities. Now you know what you got there. And the fact that you have that kind of time, the fact that he's at the age that he's at, says a lot about where it can go in the future. He's at least a cornerstone piece that you know you need at at pretty much the most critical position in the game. So at least you got that part figured out. Now you got to do a whole lot of work to figure out the rest of it, because you do not want to waste this guy's talent and his ability. You just don't want to see it all go to waste. And certainly that's a distinct possibility with how much work it looks like they have to do.
Flyers Insider Kevin Durso joining us here on Game Night on 97.3 ESPN. Flyers versus Jets tonight, the final game before the All-Star break. You hear the action. Tim Saunders, Steve Coates, right here on 97.3 ESPN FM and the 97.3 ESPN mobile app. Kevin, I got to ask you, what is up with these? I don't know if it's rumors, is it speculation? Is there really a chance that Travis Konecny could be traded?
Not right in the immediate, but I do think that that's a name you're going to hear a lot of in the offseason. I really do. I don't, I just get this sense, it's pretty much no secret anymore at this point, but they gave him a vote of confidence in the offseason. And when they were making all of those changes, when they were making trades that involved Shane Gostisbehere, Robert Haig, Nolan Patrick, Phil Myers, Jake Voracek, they're all going different places. His name was probably out there more than we know, and they gave him a vote of confidence and wanted to see if he could have the same kind of bounce back year. And he just hasn't had it to this point. I think frustration has set in a lot with him. And I wonder if this is getting to a point where you're going to hear his name out there an awful lot in the offseason again as a trade target. He's not going to go anywhere for the rest of the season. He's not going to go anywhere at the deadline. But I really think that this could be on its way. If I had to pick the three names out there that are on this roster right now that you're going to possibly hear over the offseason in trade talks, he's the top. He's definitely at the top of the list among the three, if I'm including Travis Sanheim and Ivan Provorov in that group. I think Provorov is going to be a tough guy to move because you know what you've got in him. You know you've got a guy who can play big minutes, and you know that you can rely on him if you can put a good, solid partner with him. Sanheim might be a different story, but I think that he's not going to get you as significant a package in return as Konecny would. So I think that Konecny becomes a name that has a lot of marketability when it comes to a possible offseason trade. And I just kind of get this sense with his inconsistencies over the season, I just kind of get this weird sense that he could be on the move. And it's just, I don't really have any intel on that. That's a gut feeling, but don't be surprised when you hear his name come up a lot more in the future.
Flyer fans there's some Flyer fans listening right now who are going to say, what about Claude Giroux?
Claude Giroux to me is going to be gone at the deadline. So I don't think you have to worry about that one. They know what they are as a team right now, and they know the position they're in. And I think that he wants to win. I can't tell you how many, I don't see many guys in the game who play the way that he does right now in the situation that they're in. I mean, they were on their way to, I believe it was the 10th straight loss on that 13-game losing streak. And it's a 2-1 game. The game's over. Giroux is going to dive and try to block a shot for an empty net when there's not enough time left to go back the other way. And that's the dedication he has to playing this game and to being that type of player. So I definitely think that there's a market for him. I think he's going to be one of the top names on the trade market at the deadline. And I think that when it comes down to it, he's enough of a competitor that he knows how to kind of accept what this situation is. And as much as I'm sure he'd love to be a lifetime Flyer and join the likes of Bobby Clark and see how much he can challenge for any records that are left in front of him, I think he's definitely going to get moved at the deadline because the team just knows that their future hinges on whatever happens in that deal, who they get back, what assets they get back, what picks it turns into. It's a big trade for them to make, and they better get it right. And that's, he's going to be the key player in all of this. So I don't see how that changes the dynamic. I know that there's going to be other names floating around, but I really don't think that there's any scenario where he's not on the move at the deadline.
Kevin, before I let you go, because the deadline is over a month and change away, but this weekend is the All-Star break. Now, it feels like it's been forever since we actually had an All-Star game because of COVID and other things going on in the world. But what is up with the All-Star skills competition being outside? This idea that the All-Star game is going to be new and different this year. Is it really going to be that interesting? Let's be realistic.
I mean, the buzz around it's not really high, which is kind of typical. So there are a lot of details that I'm not even kind of quite sure of myself, just because and especially when you look at least from a Flyer standpoint, Claude Giroux going is really nice to have him go back to be their representative again. But there's, obviously there's not a lot of buzz. There were players actually in the league that were very critical of the selections for the game. And the idea that very much like we see in Major League Baseball, that one player from every team needs to be representing their team. So there were players that were kind of critical of that and looking at the snubs from the All-Star teams and going, why does it have to be this way? We should be sending the best two teams, and the collection of players from every team in the league, and it shouldn't have to require that every team sends somebody. That's not the way that the rules are, obviously. They want to see every team represented around the league, but, you know, I understand where the players are coming from with that as well, because it is supposed to be a showcase for the best in the game, and we're leaving out some pretty big names off of those rosters when you think about it. So I kind of level with some of those players and how we're missing certain guys because of the fact that you have to get one representative from each team, and you could really be putting the best players on the ice and some of the best teams on the ice, you know, the way that an all-star game typically was. I mean, I definitely remember late 90s, early 2000s, the way they would do these games and the ability that they had to get full rosters of 2 teams together instead of 4 teams that are kind of limited to 9 or 10 players at most. And it just doesn't have the same effect because it's done by the divisions, not by the conferences. So I totally get the argument for it, but it's certainly it's not really as huge of a spectacle as a lot of other sports want it to be, and certainly as the NHL could make it. So, you know, if they're touting that it's going to be new and different, I'll have to check it out and see how new and different it is. But I don't exactly have my hopes up that it's going to be anything too different and exciting, because there's just a track record that says it's typically whatever the NHL thinks is new and exciting, there's a decent chance they find a way to not make it that way in the long run. So I'll have to kind of see how it goes, but I'm not holding my breath that it's going to be anything new and exciting.
Well, follow Kevin Durso on Twitter at Kevin_Durso. Check out all of his Flyers coverage over at 97.3ESPN.com. He is at the Flyers game. A Flyers-Jets foul game before the break. You would hear right here on 97.3 ESPN. Coverage begins top of the hour right here. Also on the 97.3 ESPN mobile app. Kevin, appreciate you jumping on, and enjoy at least some real hockey tonight.
Thanks, Josh. Appreciate it.
Obviously, I say that tongue-in-cheek. I understand there is hockey going to be played in some form this week of the All-Star game, but let's be realistic. An All-Star game not the same as the real deal. So Flyers coming up tonight. You can hear all the action right here on 97.3 ESPN. We'll get to your guys' thoughts and comments on the other side. 609-403-0973 is the text board. Also, direct message the show through the 97.3 ESPN mobile app. It's free thanks to First Bank of Sea Isle City. Of course, we can get into all the topics before we get out of here. I got messages on the text board. I got a message from Hal in Delaware as well. So we'll get to all you guys on the other side right here. I'm Josh Hennig. This is Game Night.
It's Philadelphia Flyers hockey tonight on 97.3 ESPN and the free mobile app with Tim Saunders and Steve Coates calling all the play-by-play action.
The Flyers host the Winnipeg Jets.
Coverage begins at 7 p.m. It's Philadelphia Flyers hockey on the radio home of the Flyers in South Jersey. 97.3 ESPN and listen live on the free mobile app.
Oh, yeah, it's on at Matt Blatt Nissan.
It's on at Matt Blatt Nissan. You asked for it, and Matt Blatt Nissan has agreed. AJ the Trade Man has extended the sale because used vehicles are still at an all-time high. So drive directly to Matt Blatt Nissan, and AJ will give you top dollar for your trade or even pay you cash on the spot. So cancel that service appointment. Don't even wash it, because Matt Blatt Nissan needs your trade. It's on at Matt Blatt Nissan on the Black Horse Pike, Egg Harbor Township.
Paid for by Christian Care Ministry.
Here's some great news. If you missed the deadline to sign up for health insurance, or if, like a lot of people, you just have a plan you're not happy with, you still have a choice. It's called MediShare. It's a Christian healthcare sharing program. There are more than 400,000 members now, and they love it. In fact, MediShare has double the customer satisfaction rate compared to that of health insurance. And MediShare really is the gold standard when it comes to healthcare sharing. It's been around more than 25 years. Members have shared more than $4 billion of each other's medical bills. Plus, MediShare is for you. It has saved its members billions by advocating on their behalf. Best of all, the typical savings for a family is around $6,000 a year. So if you think you're stuck with a high-cost health plan that doesn't have much to offer, think again. MediShare has a 98% customer satisfaction rating, and you are invited to be part of it. Call now. 855-51-BIBLE. That's 855-51-BIBLE. 855-51-BIBLE.
Sure, we have 30 seconds to tell you that drivers who switch to Progressive could save big. But then what? Well, radio has been called theater of the mind, so let's tell a story with sound effects. Wow, it's like I was in the story. Almost makes me forget this was supposed to be about saving big with Progressive. Progressive Casualty Insurance Company and Affiliates.
You probably wouldn't leave thousands of dollars on the table at a diner. Why leave thousands on the table with your tax return? Jackson Hewitt will help make sure you don't. This year, there are thousands of dollars worth of new tax credits. Your Jackson Hewitt Tax Pro will help you track down every last one, so you get your biggest refund guaranteed. Don't leave thousands on the table this year. Discover thousands of dollars in tax credits instead.
Check, please.
Learn more at jacksonhewitt.com.
Oh my God!
On Wednesday, February 9th,
The atmosphere is electric.
the two hottest live professional wrestling television shows, AEW Dynamite and AEW Rampage,
The hottest ticket in town.
make their Atlantic City debut live
Unbelievable!
at the legendary wrestling venue Boardwalk Hall.
Look at this, look at this, look at this, look at this!
The best in the world, CM Punk,
CM Punk in AEW.
Hangman Page, Bryan Danielson, Adam Cole, Dr. Britt Baker, Cody Rhodes, MJF,
Every MJF moment is the best MJF moment.
Jay, Chris Jericho, Sammy Guevara in the Inner Circle, Orange Cassidy, Darby Allin, the Icon Sting, and all your favorite AEW stars will headline this amazing night of elite professional wrestling action.
It's going to be a wild and crazy, unpredictable night, I can tell you that. Too many combustible elements here.
Don't miss AEW Live. Tickets start at $29 plus fees. Go to AEWTix.com.
So in life, throws you uh-ohs. Just say, better get Mako.
Go to Mako.com for an online estimate today.
Now, more Game Night with Josh Hennig on 97.3 ESPN and the free mobile app.
All right, let's hear from you guys have to say. Of course, we will check the 97.3 ESPN mobile app. We can hear tonight's Flyers game as well as all the shows here on 97.3 ESPN through the 97.3 ESPN mobile app. The Sports Bash with Mike Gill, Locker Room with Billy Schwab. Yours truly, Josh Hennig, here on Game Night, 6 o'clock here on 97.3 ESPN, Monday through Friday. Over on the app, Hal from Delaware chimes in, says, so this is the true reason Flores was let go by the Dolphins, all because the head coach wanted to win football games. Shame on Stephen Ross. Look, man, Stephen Ross, I told you guys when he was fired, I was suspicious. I thought that him getting rid of a coach the players loved and believed in was a scummy, dirty move. And now you're finding out that this guy didn't want to win games. He was more concerned about getting draft picks for whatever reason. I mean, I guess the guy hasn't been an owner long enough to know how the real world works. By the way, didn't they trade away the first round pick? Anyway, the Eagles got their first round pick this year. If you valued the first round pick so much, why'd you trade it away, Ross? But anyway, but then the other thing is the tampering thing. So Joe Shad covers the Dolphins. He used to work at ESPN. Now he works for the Palm Beach Post. He put this tweet out there, and I think that this statement from him is huge because so part of the accusations against Ross is that he wanted Flores to participate in tampering with a potential free agent before you were allowed to talk to free agents. So Joe Shad, who covers Dolphins, reports this. Brian Flores admires, respects Tom Brady, but didn't want to tamper and also didn't think it was the right time to recruit Brady considering the status of the Dolphins rebuild, which was intended to be a long-term plan per sources. So Stephen Ross wanted Flores to use his personal connections to Brady to get him to come to Miami, but manipulating the narrative to basically manipulate Brady into coming there when it wasn't a winning situation. And Flores was trying to be honest and do the right thing and be above board and reputable. And Ross didn't like that. So basically, Stephen Ross is a dishonest, manipulative, weak beta who happens to be a billionaire. He shouldn't be an owner in the NFL. Get rid of him. Get him out. He needs to be gone. Stephen Ross is the biggest embarrassment of all of this. I understand that certain people are going to focus on the racial element and the Giants and the Broncos storylines. But to me, the Stephen Ross accusation is incredibly damning. Hal from Delaware is right. Shame on Stephen Ross. And shame on the NFL for sitting on their hands on their statement. Their statement was all about the Giants and the Broncos stuff. It wasn't about Stephen Ross. The first statement should have been about Stephen Ross. And the longer they let this fester, the more it's going to make the league look bad. Over on the text board at 609-403-0973. Text chimes in. He had 2 points. He says, well, the Dolphins lost games 2019, got a top 5 pick, and took Tua over Herbert, so that plan failed miserably. Yeah, man, look, I'm going to be straight up with you guys. I never liked Tua coming out of college. I was not a Tua guy. I loved Herbert. So it's not about me being right. It's just about the fact that people fall in love with players. You know, I was listening to an interview with former Vikings GM Rick Spielman. He talked about the fact that usually when he made mistakes drafting players, it was because he fell in love with the player and didn't go through an exhaustive enough process of evaluating him. I think the Dolphins fell in love with Tua before they actually were sure if he was the right guy. And Tua still may end up being a good NFL quarterback, but I think Herbert and Burrow have proven that they're the two elites from that class and that Tua is just second rate at this point. The same texter also chimed in because I give everybody an opportunity, as long as within reason, to talk on this show. If you text in, you DM the show to 973 ESPN mobile app like Hal from Delaware did, or you text in at 609-403-0973. Even when I disagree with people texting in, texter says, all these people that want to play the race card are hypocrites. Why? Because all they're doing is stirring racism, in my opinion. Just stop. That's the texter texting in. Here's the problem why it's not hypocritical, because you have to call a spade. All right. If something is wrong, if something is bad, you can't just say, I don't like that because it fits into this narrative that I have. I understand that we live in a world where people listen to podcasts and watch news networks and listen to talk radio shows that fit within the narratives of their personal perspective. Okay. The reality is that, as I said earlier in the show, the problem isn't a racism issue. The problem is a prejudice issue. People get hired for jobs all the time because of nepotism and for things that are very less important in the grand scheme of things. For Blind Flores to speak up on this issue and file this lawsuit, I don't think he's being a hypocrite at all. I think Flores is coming out and saying, this is my experience, this is what happened to me, and this is unacceptable. I don't think at all that that's a problem. I don't think it's stirring the pot. I think that's him saying enough is enough. Listen, you may not like the narrative that he is using or other people in the media are using. Have a problem with the narrative. What he is suing the league for has merit. He has documentation from text messages. He has personal witness testimony that he can ascribe to. There are other coaches who are going to step up and talk about their experiences. When this goes to court, which it most likely will, because as Andrew Brand says, when the lawyers get involved, watch out. And Andrew Brand has basically echoed on Twitter what I said, that there is a legal problem. This is an EOE issue with right now. This is not just a Brian Flores or a racial issue. You may not like the narrative or the way he got to this point, but the reality is that the point we're at right now is a problem. The NFL's got to grow up. They got to get over the fact that, you can't just do whatever you want. You got to hire people and be honest with them. If the Giants already knew 3 days before they were interviewing Flores that Dable was the front runner, they should have been up with Flores and told them what was going on. The fact that they weren't is why they're in the hot water they are now. All right, Flyers, Jets next on 97.3 ESPN. I'm Josh Hennig. Have a great night, everybody.